Hello, I'm Christina Brown, and this is Our Take on Arise TV, the show where I am so excited to share the stories related and of interest to women. And joining me today as guest host is Rupa Mikkilineni. She is an attorney with extensive media and legal analysis experience, especially when it comes to high-profile court cases. And Rupa, there's a hugely high-profile court case underway right now in Florida. We're going to talk about the trial of George Zimmerman a little later, but I'm curious, because you've been covering cases for a while, I'm curious how the coverage of this particular case measures up to some of the other high-profile cases we've seen, whether it's O.J. Simpson, Michael Jackson, you name it.
Sure. Really, in many ways, similarly, but I would say that the controversy here is even greater than it was with Michael Jackson or O.J. Simpson. Michael Jackson and O.J. Simpson were celebrities, so you always had that aspect of it. But this is a matter that really gets to the crux of the common man, the common person. This is a child, an 18-year-old child, Trayvon Martin, who was gunned down, who was murdered, essentially, and we don't know what happened that night in that parking lot. We have a variety of witnesses. With O.J. Simpson, we didn't have witnesses. We had two dead people.
Yeah, and also we also didn't have the same impact. Well, first of all, with O.J. Simpson, we didn't have social media. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have Facebook. And we certainly didn't have the impact of social media on those cases that we are truly seeing with Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman trial.
We're getting opinion on social media. You're absolutely right. But I think that you, like myself, remember the day that O.J. Simpson was in that white Bronco.
That's true.
And that live feed of the car chase. Yeah. I mean, I was in Paris at the time, and it was live on CNN, I think.
Yes, and you certainly remember the video. You remember all of the live actions that were occurring. With this particular case. Obviously, we're not around to capture that kind of emotion and behavior, but what we are able to do is to evaluate all that's seen, all that's heard, and share those opinions with really anyone on Twitter, on Facebook, you name it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, which is why you really want to make sure that this jury is sequestered, and they don't have any access to these newspapers, to Twitter, to internet, to their Blackberries, because you know,
it's hard to escape.
Right, exactly.
And like I said, we'll talk a little further about the trial of George Zimmerman a little later. Thank you so much for coming back. You joined us last week during debut week, and you have a huge following. So so we bring you on back. All right, Rupa. Well, topping our daily take headlines today, President Obama is set to arrive in South Africa. However, not everyone is welcoming him with open arms. Hundreds of demonstrators marched in Pretoria today to protest against Barack Obama's visit to South Africa hours before he was due to arrive in Johannesburg. They're called the so-called Nobama Coalition, primarily made up of the South African Communist Party. President Obama's visit is part of a three-country trip. Now, the White House hopes it will actually compensate for what some view as years of neglect by the first black president of the United States. It is, however, unclear as to whether Obama will still visit Nelson Mandela, who remains hospitalized for a recurring lung infection. Meanwhile, Rupa, we were talking about this a little earlier. It seems odd to think, well, why wouldn't he visit former President Nelson Mandela? But of course, when you have the U.S. president, that's a major security detail. Sure. It would really change the energy, the mood in that area.
Right. I think that President Obama is probably thinking this is a private moment for the family, and he doesn't want to intrude. So he did say that he didn't say he's not going to visit, but he said that he'll assess the situation when he's on the ground.
Sure. And of course, the other question is, it would be considered proper to do so, to pay tribute, to take that time. However, you have to balance that, right, with the potential intrusion, as you said, that might cause the family and the staff of the hospital.
Absolutely, and as you'd mentioned earlier when we were talking, this presidential detail involved, the security, the advanced people, everything that's involved in that would just be possibly quite disruptive to the situation.
But like everyone, we're all watching and waiting and hoping that South Africa's former President Nelson Mandela is able to leave the hospital, and certainly with all the well wishes and prayers coming in, that is what we are all hoping for. Well, First Lady Michelle Obama did find herself with a warm welcome. This while she was in Senegal. She visited an all-girls school named in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, where she inspired young girls to excel in all they do. Let's listen in.
So I know that it can take real courage to pursue your dreams, to come to this school, to pour yourself into your education, to envision possibilities for yourselves that no one could ever imagine. But don't ever forget that by investing in your education, you are doing the very best thing you can do, not just for yourselves, but for your children and your grandchildren. And you're also doing the very best thing that you can do for your country. That's true here in Senegal and in the United States and across the globe.
And hundreds of students warmly welcomed Michelle Obama with the high school's choir singing the American as well as Senegalese anthems. And what a beautiful sight and experience that must have been for the First Lady.
Amazing experience. And she's just such an inspirational character to young women all over.
Yeah. And we've seen the First Lady on these overseas trips take the time out of her schedule to speak particularly to young women. Yes. and inspire them to pursue their education because, as she said, that's a path to success.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, as we were talking earlier, Rupa, about the George Zimmerman trial, of course, today testimony is continuing. This first week, however, has revealed a lot about the night Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by the volunteer neighborhood watchman. Some 15 witnesses have now taken the stand this week. Judge Deborah Nelson allowed into evidence contentious 911 tapes, the non-emergency calls that George Zimmerman repeatedly made to police in the months leading up to the February 2012 death of Martin. Prosecutors argue that the tapes showed Zimmerman's mindset and ruthless, repeated profiling attempts. The jury also heard from mystery witness Rachel Jantel, the 19-year-old who prosecutors called their star witness. Rachel was on the phone with Trayvon minutes before he was killed. There was so much that we heard and saw in this first week of testimony. We hear, first of all, George Zimmerman's voice on the 911 recordings, and in many ways we hear the voice of Trayvon through witness number 8, or right. Rachel Jantel.
Right. Well, what we're seeing this week is a real attempt by the defense to discredit Rachel Jantel. Essentially, there are two things that they are saying that discredit her. And I think we need to look at this very carefully because they're trying to portray her as someone who is inconsistent in her factual representations, and therefore she likely lied or exaggerated what she saw that night and what she later reported. Now, ultimately what they're using is her lie when she said that she didn't go to Trayvon Martin's funeral or wake because she wasn't feeling well and had gone to the hospital. We later found out that that was a lie. She has admitted that. But the poor girl saw her boyfriend, or not saw, but heard her boyfriend
and
murdered.
I think it's important to point out that, in talking about why she lied. Right. She said she didn't want to see his dead body. And I don't think anyone should necessarily be shocked by that. It seems like that would be a very kind of natural thing. That imagine you were on the phone with someone moments before he was shot and killed. I don't know of anyone who would necessarily be in a rush to now see his body. I think that would be a very traumatic experience. Nevertheless, it is a lie, and it is a lie that defense attorneys can exploit. But you talked about two things. So.
Right. The second thing that comes up is the fact that she'd written a letter with a recollection of the facts of that night. And she now states in testimony that she did not write that letter, actually, or that she had somebody else write it.
But she dictated the letter.
She dictated it, precisely. And she also was unable to read it out loud because she doesn't read cursive. So again, they're making an attempt to really just poke holes in,
Right.
in her credibility.
And that letter, I think what the defense is using to their advantage, at least as much as possible, is the fact that in that letter, she doesn't actually make reference to it being a confrontation that stemmed from race.
Right.
She left certain things that she's saying under oath during testimony were things that were absent from the letter. But then again, she says, well, yes, this was a letter that was going to my friend's mother. There were certain things that, yes, I left out. It's
Right.
painful enough.
Right.
But this is certainly a case that is not going away anytime soon. This is just the first week of testimony, and so there will be a lot more heard and a lot more to evaluate.
Yes.
Well, we are on Facebook, and we are also on Twitter, so I'm asking you to follow us on Twitter at Our Take Arise TV, and remember to like and leave comments on our Facebook page at Our Take on Arise TV. And you are watching Our Take.